So if you're wondering how to get into Vanguard, this is the video for you. This video won't cover how to play the game, but rather an explanation to the different formats with a focus on Standard, the main format of the game that is most supported since its release in 2021, and how to begin your journey with what I think is the best card game, Cardfight Vanguard. To begin, Vanguard has been around for a while. It began in 2011, and this is what I'll refer to as the original era, as in 2018, Bushiroad, the company behind Vanguard, decided the game's power level and requirements was too difficult for new players to get into the game, and decided to reboot it, making 2018 to 2021 the V era, where the older cards were remade with new effects to give all players a new and even starting point. The V era is often regarded as the worst Vanguard has ever been, with bad card design that was often meant to be obsolete within one or two sets, with already miserable pull rates. The end of the V series came in 2021, where Bushiroad made another reboot which was actually pretty good. This is the D era, also known as Overdress or Standard. Each era of Vanguard has cards in different borders, but the easiest way to tell them apart is the symbol on the bottom left. Original era cards have no symbol, while the V era has a silver V icon, and D era cards have a red D icon. Standard is very different from the previous eras of Vanguard in that the core rules for the game were changed for the first time, making it so you had a Yu-Gi-Oh! Styled extra deck for your ideal rides instead of having to draw into cards to ride from hand. They also took the 24 clans from the previous eras and stuck them together to make nations, something that was always there but rarely mattered. Now instead of building a deck out of one clan, you'd build a deck out of one nation, turning the options from 1 of 24 to 1 of 5, making the game more like Magic's Colors, where there were plenty of generic cards to use in any deck. Nowadays there are 3 official formats. Premium, which allows for all cards to be played, but you must choose one of the 24 clans to build around, with any card from the D era being usable with that clan so long as it's from the same nation. Then V Premium, which only uses V cards, the ones with the V at the bottom left, which is also restricted to using clans. And finally Standard, which only uses cards from the D era that have the red D on the bottom left. Premium and V Premium get supported here and there, but right now Standard is the most supported format, both in terms of events and also releases. The 5 nations of Standard have decks within them with support specifically meant for them, and each nation has a general style that applies to most if not all decks within them. Dragon Empire gets high power for low cost, getting lots of retiring, restanding, and buffing effects for little effort. Keter Sanctuary is all about rearguards, making boards that work well with each other with lots of synergy between the rearguards and even the cards in your deck. They also have lots of abilities to stack the deck, adding to their levels of synergy. Dark States is the most resource-conscious nation, as most will focus on amassing tons of cards in Soul, either to Soul Blast for high costs, use as a second hand, or just get stronger effects based on how many cards are in them, making it more of a condition than a resource. Stoicheia takes common things and does them weirdly. Your back row boosters, they can attack in Magnolia. Your drop zone, it's a second hand for Zorga who can play orders a second time by using them in the drop zone. Your normal 3 attacks per turn, Rookie Hour. Maelstrom and Flagberg are getting at least double that. Brandgate is also weird in that they focus on set orders to facilitate unique gameplay styles. Orphist and Evo will set up as many as possible to satisfy conditions, Gravidio will use them as a one-time resource, and Archite will use them as a reusable effect. Beyond the 5 main nations is Lyrical Monasterio, which is well known for being full of anime girls and nothing else of note, which is well known for having no recurring style but rather has the most decks that each play with unique playstyles and mechanics. The main 5 nations get supported in the main sets, while Lyrical gets support in their own sets that release less frequently. There's also collaboration sets that feature cards with characters from other IPs, but those get support way less frequently, so unless you really like them, I'd recommend not picking them up, as playing a deck that never really gets support is gonna make the game get pretty old pretty fast. Each nation has a pre-made deck or two that'll contain full sets of the cards you'd actually use, meaning buying multiple copies like in other games isn't required, though of course they won't be competitive out of the box, but will rather be a starting point to upgrade them from with the few cards that you'll always hold on to. These are good and balanced ways to start the game if you and a friend just want to pick one up and try the game out. They're not too complex while still showing off what makes the game fun, and are good if you're new to card games in general. Coming soon are the stand-up deck sets, 3 pre-made decks that are best for new players but maybe only if you're familiar with card games already. They contain a better quality deck than you'd find in the starter decks, along with some valuable reprinted cards, plus sleeves, a deck box, and storage box. They'll be around $50 each, so if you like how one of them looks, I'd highly recommend picking them up when they release in English in October. The Stride deck sets are also around $50 and are actually contenders for top tier in the meta. They feature decks from the original era remade for modern play with high power for low cost, along with the ability to just stack power the longer the game goes on. They require some understanding to get the rulings and mechanics, meaning they're absolutely a good purchase, but you shouldn't start with them, especially if you're new to card games in general. It's better to understand the base mechanics of Vanguard first, so that playing any other deck is more manageable, since the Stride decks play very differently from any other deck. Right now there's two out, Chronojet and Messiah. Chronojet is more complete out of the box, as Messiah requires a pricey card to really play it right, and people often see Chronojet as the better of the two since it's less piece reliant. Coming soon are Luard and Shiranui, which is pretty safe to say that they'll also be hitting the high tiers. A previous version of Luard is kind of the reason why V-Series died, and Shiranui is also partly why the original series died. Also, if you really like one of the Stride decks, you can also order it in the premium version. These contain the deck fully blinged out, plus a bigger storage box and some extra accessories. Just don't get confused and buy the premium version when you just want the original, as the premium version costs around $300, while the normal is only around $50. Like any card game, buying singles is the best method for building decks. It costs less and gets you what you want. Any site you would use for TCG orders like TCG Player is pretty good, though some other options are Trading Card Mint, which I need to give a shout out since any order I've put through them has gotten unnecessarily good protection, so I feel like it's worth it to say. And also 50 Cards, who is active in the Vanguard community for an added plus, and has before sold custom budget decks at a pretty good price with some pretty cool options. He also does nation splits whenever a new set comes out, meaning you just pay in advance with a nation that you want and you get everything from it when the set comes out. So of course not something you get into right away when starting out the game, but in the future, definitely something to look out for. If you do want to buy some product to help out your local game store, which is always a super nice thing to do, the best set I could recommend is Festival Booster 2023, which is just about released and has plenty of good cards for any deck that I could recommend if you're not sure what set you want to buy into. Something Vanguard does is make the most important staple cards super accessible, but also have some obvious upgrades that range in necessity. What I mean is, Perfect Guards have versions of themselves where you don't need to discard a card to use them if you have one or less card in your hand. Front and draw triggers have versions of themselves that get an extra 5k shield if your opponent's at grade 3, and critical triggers have versions of themselves that can go to soul after they boost to give something 2000 power. These are all nice cards to have, and most don't cost too much to pick some up. Anyways, Festival Booster 2023 has all these triggers and Perfect Guards reprinted, along with a lot of other good stuff that will make for a good set. Some good resources for the game are Vanguard Paradox, which gives coverage on events and decks with statistics, and Dexander, which collects deck lists from over the internet to give you really good ideas on what decks are being played each set and what those deck lists look like, with the wiki of course being a good library of sets and cards so you can check specific information at your own pace. Some good YouTube channels that I'd recommend checking out would be Different Fight, who is super active in the community and has also been working with Bushiroad as a commentator multiple times, with some really good videos. There's also Outer Orange, who has also worked as a commentator before and just gives very good insight on the game that any player could use quite well. A slightly more unknown YouTuber, Meta Nerd, also gives really good discussions on releases and reviews on individual cards that really help to get a second eye on your deck. They're all really great, and I think they deserve your full attention if you want to get into the game more, so check them out. The most unfortunate part of Vanguard is that finding a locals that supports it with events may be hard. Online alternatives to playing Vanguard could be Tabletop Simulator on Steam or Cardfight Area, an online fan-made game that gives a good manual experience to play with friends and test any card you want. There used to be a mobile game called Vanguard Zero which had very watered-down gameplay but was a nice treat for fans of the anime, as it gave a lot of content for those characters. Zero was recently shut down though, so while there is content for it online, you've sadly missed the opportunity to play it yourself. There are multiple games for each era available on the 3DS or Switch, with all but one of them being Japanese exclusive. That being Vanguard Deer Days, which is sadly burdened by a high price tag for mixed results of quality. It is fun though, and there's a demo for it on Steam if you want to give the game a more handheld try before trying it out yourself just with YouTube tutorials. This also brings me to my own personal advice. Test everything, whether it be physical proxies or online test hands. For me at least, this is a good way to just learn the deck and see how it plays, and also just learn which options work in the deck and what choices I should make. This is a good idea to do before spending money on cards or a deck. You should make sure that you know what you're putting your money towards is what you want. And speaking of money, investing. Don't do it if you're only doing it to make a profit. Let others enjoy the game without you being there to ruin prices, and make enjoying the game that much harder. Investing for yourself, however, is something that I can support so long as you're okay with it too. If you see cards for a deck you like but don't really want to play right now, whether because it's not good right now or everything else in it is too pricey, still go for it if the price is okay. A good part of Bushiroad is that they understand there are some players that will not play their game unless they can play the deck that they like, meaning every deck gets support either by generic cards or their own specific cards every few sets. Also meaning that with that continued support, and just how Vanguard works, any deck can do pretty well for your tournament at locals. I do say to only invest in stuff if you're okay with it too, because I need you to make sure you don't waste too much money. The variety of decks is always enticing to be able to collect and just have a ton of decks, but I think it's important to be reasonable with how much you have and not getting too in over your head. Remember, you can only play with one deck at a time, so be reasonable and don't feel obligated to spend more money to enjoy the game or stress yourself over something that doesn't really matter like this. Also, anything B tier and up on the tier list is pretty interchangeable. Again, the game is direct, there's triggers, it's just you versus your opponent, don't worry too much about it, bring the deck you like, don't really expect much from C tier and below because those are actually bad, but B tier and up, I'd say you're just fine. So don't think that your only option to play the game is something super expensive when some of the cheaper decks will do just perfectly fine. Anyways, some good stuff to buy for investments would be perfect guards and effect triggers, as these can be used in any deck you build, so long as it is of the right nation of course, but still, just pretty good investments at not too high a price. The best perfect guards and triggers are reprinted in Festival Booster 2023, so again, very good set to buy into if you want to buy something and not sure what to get. All things considered, Cardfight Vanguard is an immensely fun game. I think it's the most direct card game there is, with the large focus on the battle phase just being two players with what they can do with their decks, devoid of filler and a specific good part that you're just waiting all game to get into. Vanguard has a few turns where not much happens, but it is no time at all before you're just at the peak of the game and it just keeps going from there. And beyond that, the aesthetics are just the best and most realized I've seen in any card game. Seriously, sci-fi fantasy Amazon that makes weapons that become the rear guards when you operate them with the support cards that are the staff of the company is just you don't get that anywhere else but in Vanguard. And the mechanics of each deck are where Bushiroad's ingenuity shines. Throughout the game's eras, they haven't hesitated to give decks a one-of-a-kind mechanic just to separate them from others. Sure, Toshikaze was the original deck to retire your own rearguards for more power, but Shadow Paladin quickly took that as their strong suit. So when the V era came around, they took the opportunity to remake Toshikaze's identity and gave it the equip gauge ability for something more specific to it than Shadow Paladin's current identity. They did the same thing with Neo Nectar, where they implemented tokens into the game just so that it, again, had its own identity. Not only this for specific decks, but in the D era they leaned so far into making the game more direct, giving the right deck which eliminated so much bricking and opened the doors for more creativity in how you and they made decks. I highly implore you to play Cardfight Vanguard. It is a breath of fresh air as far as any card game goes. Thanks for watching, guys. I thought this was a good video to make, since I've actually been seeing quite a few new players join the game recently and it's been really awesome to see. I really do hope that the game can continue to grow, and if you did like what you see today, be sure to check out my other videos where I usually make commentated matches with insight on how the deck works. I also try to make them comedic enough so that you can get a kick out of watching them, so please check them out. I also have a Twitter you can follow where I either post my art or just talk about the game. If you want to subscribe or follow, I'd really appreciate it. I do really love this game, and enjoying it with others is the best thing to me. So, with that said, see y'all next time.